Andy, when I left you on Friday, we were talking about all this snow that we're going to get in
Yeah.
Charlotte, how everybody was excited. It's going to be great. The snow was supposed to start in the afternoon, carry through early morning, 3 to 5 inches. Everybody was going to be like excited. You wake up on a Saturday morning, you want to go out and do some fun things out there. And what happens, Andy? The colossal letdown.
Yeah.
So it starts to snow about 3 o'clock. There gets a little dusting on the ground. You're like, "Ooh, this is exciting." It looks like the flakes are coming down a little bit more. And then it went to the proverbial sleet.
Oh, that sleet's the worst.
And when you look at the map, you can see the snow, the blue
Yeah.
line is north, and the pink line for sleet is south. And we were just on that line. And basically, we wound up with about a half an inch of ice
Yeah.
on the ground. What a fucking disappointment. I
I'm
can't tell
sorry,
you
Dave. I'm
how disappointed.
dressed in sleet pink for you this morning. I'm sorry for it. Sleet's just a mess, right? 'Cause it just makes a mess of everything. We got a nice little dusting, so we had like I saw the snow falling down. I think it was a Friday night or Saturday night. I can't even keep track of things anymore. But I saw it coming down, and I was cursing it because I was like, I don't want to shovel you in the morning, but I'm going to do it. Woke up. There's like an inch and a half of just powder. I went out. I dusted off the car. I shoveled the driveway and the porch. Everything was clean. It was beautiful. I loved it. So I'm sorry you didn't get a chance to enjoy the snow. You can always come back up north, Dave. We'll welcome you up here if you want to come back to the Old Dominion.
Yeah, the way I would have liked it here was exactly what you described. Get like 2 to 3, 4 inches,
Yeah,
shovel it off, brush it off your car,
yeah.
and it's melted by the end of the day. Like that's all I would have liked. That's all I would have liked.
I'm sorry,
So
David. And I know it's your birthday week. If I can do anything to influence the weather for you, I'll do the best that I can. I'll do the best that I can.
I appreciate that, Andy. I appreciate that. All right, so let's go ahead and get into our segments. We got to start, Andy, with NFL. We had actually it was 5 straight days. It'll be, yeah, 5 straight days of
Yeah.
football. If you include the Penn State game on Thursday, Ohio State beating Texas in a game that was a lot closer than we thought on Friday. Then you went into the NFL games. And Andy, I don't know, like we have a game tonight, the Rams versus the Vikings. But for the most part, these games were kind of eh, type of thing. I don't know if I was the one big surprise was Houston like really taking it to the Chargers. That was a big surprise. I mean, and Herbert was awful. He was four
Yeah,
interceptions.
a lot of picks.
Yeah, one was a pick six. It was really bad. I thought the way the game started, they were going to take it to him pretty well, and then next thing you know, it just completely turned. Then the Ravens game was really non-competitive. Even though it was a two-touchdown score, the Ravens just kind of slowed down in the second half. Derrick Henry is a beast, and Lamar Jackson, they ran for 299 yards.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
that's crazy.
And then you had the game yesterday start off. Buffalo beat the hell out of the Broncos, which we thought the Broncos were outmatched. And then the Eagles really just kind of glided to the win over the Packers. So, it was okay. So, what'd you think, Andy?
I mean, Dave, you summarized all that pretty well. They were kind of blah games. The favored team won. The Chargers did what the Chargers do seemingly every playoffs. They made it in. They got kicked right out. The Texans won their first game. We've got a rematch here in the AFC of last year's divisional round, right? So the AFC is looking very consistent. There's going to be some great games next weekend. Now, I think that Baltimore Buffalo game is going to be great.
Yeah.
The Bills looked really good. Baltimore looked very good. They've hit some weird games. They're playing well when they need to. Philly like could have played better, but Jalen Hurts coming out a couple of weeks out with his concussion, they dominated a strong team, right? They owned the Packers pretty much the entire game. So I think all that looked well. But Dave, the Washington Commanders came out last night. I thought they might have a chance against the Bucks. For a little while, it looked like the Bucks were going to do it, but Washington pulled it off, and so they
Yeah.
very nice unexpected win over the Buccaneers. The only upset so far. We might see another one tonight as the Rams host the Vikings, and it's a very close 4-5 matchup. But listen, the Washington Commanders look like a legitimately good football team. They're now 13 wins on the season. The regular season was the biggest turnaround in franchise history. With Dan Quinn and their young quarterback, Jaden Daniels, like really just turning the story in Washington. The ghost of Daniel Snyder is being exorcised. The team is playing great football. And Dave, I said before, my oldest son is a Commanders fan. My youngest son is an Eagles fan. And as you and listeners know, I'm a Lions fan. The Lions host the Commanders. There's a lot of trash talk going on in my household right now because the Lions' path to the Super Bowl probably looks like Washington and Philly. There's going to be some really good football coming up. Next week's divisional round is going to be very, very good.
Yeah, it definitely has the potential to be really good. Houston's going to play Kansas City.
Yeah.
And then the game of the weekend, I think, is going to be that Buffalo versus Ravens game. And then, like you mentioned, you're going to play the Commanders, and then the winner of the game tonight will play the Eagles. It still looks like the top two teams, Andy, are going to make it. Well, I don't know. The Ravens are the 3 seed, but we have all thought all along this year that they were like one of the top teams
Yeah.
in the league. So that game's a coin flip. I do think the Ravens, if the Ravens can hold the run game of the Bills down, and really limit what Josh Allen can pass to, they're going to be have a good chance of winning there. But we can talk about some of that this week, coming up. But um, yeah, I think that Commander story is really interesting. Suck ass owner for over 20 years, all of a sudden leaves, and there's just renewed sense of energy in that fan base. It's pretty exciting for them to see. I'll give them a lot of credit, even though I hate the Commanders.
Yeah, what I mean, I've always given the Commanders crap. I've cheered for them at times when they've been really like down the doldrums. Like I like to see them not be that terrible. So I've cheered for the Commanders on and off over the years just because they are the local team, even though they should be a Virginia team. So, but generally I hate on the Commanders. But like I'm generally excited for them to be doing well right now. Happy to see them winning games. Happy to see this new leadership team on the field and in the office really turning it around. So it's been a fun story. Of course, one to get absolutely obliterated by Detroit come Sunday, and I can't wait to see that. That's actually a Saturday night game is Washington and Detroit, and that marquee matchup you mentioned, Baltimore at Buffalo, 6:30 Eastern on Sunday. That is the prime game, for the weekend. The NFL knows it. America's going to be watching it. Listen, two names have been bannered around for the MVP probably more than anybody else: Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and they're going to come head to head and play in a rematch from last year to probably see who gets to go to Kansas City to play the Chiefs. Maybe the Texans get the upset. I don't know, but it's going to be a tough slugfest, I think, and it's going to be a fun game. So America's going to be watching, the world's going to be watching, and we'll see where it goes. We'll see where it goes.
Yep, yeah, no, definitely it's going to be very interesting. Andy, switching a little bit to the coaching news, as was expected, Mike Vrabel, the former Patriot, is now going to be the head coach of the New England Patriots. So that's not a surprise. We'll see how he does. Again, the guy had mediocre success over 6 years in Tennessee. Everyone will say, well, he didn't have a good quarterback. Well, he had Derrick Henry. His teams did okay. I mean, I don't know if this is like a slam dunk hire, but because again, you can have a great coach and just shitty owners, and I think we're seeing that the Crafts may be shitty owners after all. So that's one piece of it, and then you still have the Cowboys who are hanging around. I told you Zimmer or McCarthy's going to stay, Andy.
Yeah, it looks like they're like seriously negotiating a contract with him.
He's going to stay.
I hope they sign him to a $100 million 10-year guaranteed contract. That'd be glorious to see. The Vrabel excitement. Look, everybody said that when the Patriots fired Jared Mayo, Robert Kraft had his eye on Mike Vrabel. Listen, I've got nothing against Mike Vrabel, but like you said, like the Vrabel excitement. He's not Pete Carroll. He's not Bill Belichick, and he's not the returning Joe Gibbs. He's not this like legendary quarterback that's come back to do something fantastic. He was a mediocre coach that did okay on an okay team, consistently couldn't get anywhere in the playoffs. Like I don't get what the excitement is. So personally, like I'm fine watching New England not be good. I don't think Mike Vrabel turns this franchise around in a year or 2 years. That division is competitive, right? The Bills are good. They're going to stay competitive for a while. The Dolphins always look like they're going to be really good. And the Jets, all their issues aside, have a lot of potential on that team. The
Yeah.
Patriots are a ways away from being good. So it'll be interesting to see what happens up in New England over the next couple of years. But the Vrabel excitement is I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the Patriots, everyone's like, well, they got a ton of cap space. Hey, guess what? They've had a ton of cap space for a long time. This
Yeah.
isn't new.
Yeah.
They just don't want to spend money. I mean, they went on the cheap. A lot of the guys that they never spent on, everyone will say, well, that was Bill Belichick, like not wanting one person to be bigger than the rest and all this stuff. And there may have been part of that, but the Crafts don't spend money. And when they have spent money, has been on great things. They don't have a lot of talent. You're right, Andy. So that's going to be fascinating to watch. The Bears are seem like they might be targeting the Notre Dame coach Marcus Freeman, so we'll see how that plays out. That usually gets dropped, and then next thing you know, the college comes in and says, "We're going to pay him the most money ever." It's usually a big marketing plea, but look, I think Marcus Freeman is a really good football coach, so we'll see how that works out. So, all right, Andy, let's go into our next segment here. Andy, an important ruling probably is going to come out today, um, related to the social media platform TikTok. Are you a TikToker, Andy?
I'm not a TikToker, Dave.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm not either.
You're not practicing your dances and recording them.
Well, that's the thing is like TikTok started off as a platform where people would do the dances and all this other stuff, and it still does that, obviously, but it's evolved a lot more into how some of these social media platforms have evolved, and the big piece of it is just how the data is handled via TikTok.
Yeah,
And some of the stories about, it being, because it's a Chinese, well, it's a US company that's Chinese based, or there's some China connection there, and the data gets to China. And everyone's concerned about China, 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 the data. China's been responsible for, I think somebody was saying in the neighborhood of like China probably has 50% of all data at this point in the
yeah,
world, because they've been connected with so many of these large data breaches, Marriott, US personnel records and all this other stuff. But the point is this: in 2018, Andy, then President Trump worked and they had a bipartisan agreement to ban TikTok.
yeah.
And it was bipartisan. That's the key word there. Both sides worked together on this. And the former president was a big proponent of this. President Biden comes in the office and actually puts that into practice and says on January whatever 19, I don't know the date, but in this date in January 2025, we're going to ban it. I think it's the 19th or whatever. Now, President Trump, who has had discussions with the CEO of TikTok,
Yeah.
who may have received money from TikTok on, again, companies can, support any candidates they want to. I'm sure they went to both parties. Um, is now saying, hey, give me some reprieve before enacting this law so that we can make some changes potentially. So, a lot of to do going on with TikTok.
Yeah.
Are you following this case?
Dave, I have been watching it because it's really kind of a garbage case, right? I mean, it
Yeah.
came out on the grounds of national security threat, right? And I don't disagree with that, right? I mean, I don't disagree with the fact that I don't like China slurping up all this data. I don't like it sitting there. The Chinese laws, we know the government of China can access data that's retained by companies in China. So I don't like it. But nobody's forcing anybody to use TikTok, right?
Yep.
It's 100% voluntary. You don't have to have it. You don't have to use it. You knowingly share your data when you do give it. So the basis for banning it is like weak at best, right? I mean, there's no like there's lots of national security threats, but it's a voluntary choice. You can't cut that off, right? And TikTok's not really slurping up any more data than Facebook, Meta, TikTok, and anybody else's, right? Any place we go on the online is consuming all that information, right? So the grounds for the ban were kind of stupid to start with. A very sort of like Trump puffing his chest out, nationalism, seeking to force a sale, presumably to one of his very wealthy allies, right? People are talking now that if it goes forward, maybe X's owner tries to purchase that as well. And so Trump was very, insistent on this, made it a national issue, right, while he was in office. Biden came in and just continued the process, right? Just as
Yeah.
stupidly continued the process. And now Trump has almost 15 million followers on TikTok. He's a big fan. He likes it. It's a way to engage with young people. It's a way to engage with the world. It helps his brand, right? So suddenly, for no apparent reason, no actual legitimate reason, he's against the TikTok ban, right? Like John Kerry, he was for it before he was against it or whatever that was, right? So no, with no real explanation. But now the Supreme Court seems like they want to enforce the ban, right? And so we'll see what the Supreme Court decides. We'll see how President Trump and what TikTok decide to do in response to that decision. But ultimately, it shouldn't be banned. Like you can't just ban something because it potentially could have security implications. Like that applies to some of what's happening right here in the United States when it comes to abortion restrictions and data being accessed and retained and shared, right? The fact that something could be a threat. Look, we've had service members running around with fitness apps in private deployments, right? Places that were in public, revealing a lot of data. That was a national security concern. And so the military said, hey, you can't have Strava or Garmin or whatever other app on your person while you're deployed in these overseas military operations because your data is giving away our information, right? That was a national security concern. The military stepped in, made a very specific ban for their personnel. 100% makes sense. That was a legitimate security risk. But can those service members use those apps domestically? Well, I don't know what the military's rule is, to be honest. But we all can. Everybody else can because it's okay. It's a choice we're making to share that information. And it's the same thing with TikTok. I don't personally think you should use it. I don't want to use it. I think it is a privacy concern, but it shouldn't be a national security ban. That Americans can't use it. So we'll see. We'll see what the Supreme Court decides.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to watch. I mean, the Supreme Court ruling is expected today. I think they're largely leaning, based on the questions from the court, leans like they're going to keep the ban in effect, and I think it's going to be fascinating to watch this thing play out. But it is also the flip-flop nature of all of these
Oh
things.
yeah.
It's disgusting to see how, just a little bit of money, well, actually a lot of money, I'm sure, goes a long way into the pockets of some of these politicians. So fascinating to watch. Yeah, we'll
Hey,
just
we're a third of Americans use TikTok, which is that's a lot of people. I mean, a third of
yeah,
Americans. Pew did a little finding back in December, and what the number was 59% of adults under 30 use the app, and
yeah.
the numbers go down, but Americans over 65 also 10% using TikToks. I mean, it's very popular. People like it. They have fun with it. I mean, that's their choice, right? That's their choice. And again, I don't know if it's any worse. Like, I don't know if people feel any more comfortable with Meta having all of your data, right? And they have all of your data.
Yeah. I mean, it's the China propaganda campaign too, Andy, like or that idea that the algorithms for US people are different than the algorithms for other people. It's just like I don't know, it's fascinating to watch all this stuff play out. So we'll see. Maybe we'll talk about this on Wednesday. Maybe we won't,
Yeah.
because again, we'll see how the topics play out. Okay, Andy, let's wrap up this week or the start of the week with my wife and I started watching this show. It's called Say Nothing, or yeah, Say Nothing. It was a FX show. I think it came out in November, but we're late to the game, of course. It's a period drama, like 1970s Belfast, Ireland, Dublin, about the Irish Republican Army, their fight against the British. Obviously we know, like, there's a lot of history here. There's a lot of stuff that's been, over the last 20 years, that situation's been largely, you know pacified, or it's been resolved, and there's been a lot of progress made. I think this is an interesting story because it's being told from the Irish Republican Army.
Yeah.
which many individuals would consider a terrorist group, an insurgent group. It was a very violent and bloody struggle, um, ironically, between Catholics and Protestants. I mean, this is largely what the driver behind it was, which doesn't make it any different than what goes on in the Middle East, but yet for some reason, it's treated differently. But nonetheless, it's told from that Irish Republican Army perspective, and I struggled watching this because
Okay.
I'm like, who am I supposed to be cheering for here? When the individuals who were the IRA people were captured or whatever, am I happy about that, or do I agree with the plight of the IRA individuals? And so it was a fascinating, it's a really good show. I would just say it's a really good show. I want to keep watching it, but I struggled with it. Admittedly, it was interesting. So
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, and again, we talked before about we're in a time now where storytelling and movie making shows are giving much more of sort of both sides of the argument, right? There's less direct sort of good guys versus bad guys, and there's more like, well, there's oftentimes bad guys and bad guys, right? And the bad guys have some good guy in them too, and I think when it comes to some of these like intense international conflicts that we've seen, over centuries, like there's always a complexity of stories to go along with it. And what happened in Ireland, no different than what's happening in parts of the world today. Like you can you can disagree with the violence, right? Like you never want to see violence, especially when it's targeting innocent civilians. And unfortunately, in all these complex situations, Ireland and otherwise, like you saw civilians get hurt in these conflicts. But the backstory and like the frustrations and the tension, like you can sort of empathize with all sides in these stories, right? You can disagree with their tactics and what they do, but the fact that there's like frustration and anger and a one for whether it's independence or more rights or self-governance or like whatever it is, like you can understand it. And frustration gets to a point where some people think I have to take up arms against my oppressor and take physical action. You never want to condone violence, right? We've talked about that a lot these last few weeks of the things we've seen here in the United States, but you can at least sort of empathize sometimes with like what the story behind it, right? And the frustrations of people.
yeah, I think it's a very good storytelling, and you're right. I mean, you can see this in so many different ways, right? I mean, the they did a good job of sharing some of the struggles and
Yeah.
why they felt like they had to do this, and they tried peaceful, but then it went this. It's interesting, and again, I think and again, this is storytelling, so it doesn't quite. It's these situations are a lot more complex than a 45-minute TV show on a weekly basis for even if it is 10 episodes or whatever it is. There's a lot of nuance to it that doesn't really get into the details on. So it's fascinating to watch. So I enjoyed that show over the weekend. We were watching that through. So again, a little late to the game on that if anybody else has been watching that. You watching anything, Andy?
So we watched the Christopher Reeves story, the Superman, the Christopher Reeves story this weekend, and man, like that was really powerful, right? I mean, I think if folks our age remember the Superman movies, they know Christopher Reeve, and like I knew that he gotten hurt. It was a busy time in my life, so like I didn't really pay a lot of attention to what happened there after he got injured and paralyzed, right? I mean, a very consequential freak accident. But it's an incredible story of this man who went from, you know, trying to get into acting to becoming Superman and just a huge success. Like so many, Hollywood stories and others, like a difficult, complex backstory on the guy, family issues and everything else. But then this freak accident, his horse stops, he goes flying, lands on his head, could have died, could have walked away, instead got paralysis and was I mean almost taken off the ventilator and died, right then and there. And to see a story and him and his wife championing people with disabilities, promoting legislation that was eventually signed by then President Obama to help those with disabilities, and now people are no longer suffering the same way. I mean, there's still a lot of people that are limited in what they're able to do mobility wise, but a lot of people are getting up and walking, Dave, because of that funding and the efforts of Christopher Reeve and his wife Dana. it was a pretty incredible story. There was more watering of the eyes than I expected, I would say, during the movie, and it was a good watch. It was a powerful story. He's a, I mean, it's complicated guy, but his advocacy was really powerful and has helped a lot of people suffering through paralysis. Pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, so this is on Max. I don't know if you said that earlier. This is like and so I've seen this come up a couple times, and I've wanted to watch it, but I may have to go back and look through it now too. Just so much out there, Andy.
Yeah.
It's interesting, but you're right. I think Christopher Reeves, again, when he had his accident, his terrible accident, a lot of people thought that was just the end of it, but you're right. I mean, he did so much more work, and it's great when you can use your power or your position to do that. And I definitely applaud. Sounds like it was a really good action there or activity to watch and get through there. So good on you, Andy Jabor. So what the check.
I didn't do anything. I sat on my butt and watched, but it was good to do. But yeah, there's a lot happening in the world around us, Dave. We'd be remiss not to say, a lot of continued devastation, obviously, out in the Los Angeles area. I mean, that's an unbelievable story of what's happening. The multiple fires. I think the death count is now approaching 25.
Yeah.
Devastation is unreal. There's a lot to talk about there. We talked a little bit about it last week. Some of the inflammatory comments. Obviously, there's questions about climate and environment, and at the end of the day, like right now, like there's a lot of people suffering, a lot of people away from their homes, a lot of people, who are in danger. So definitely our thoughts and our hearts go out to all of those, and the Red Cross is collecting donations. Others are as well. There's a lot of ways to try and contribute, but man, you just really feel bad for the devastation that's happening and the ways it's impacting so many lives, and that's going to have long-term effect on a lot of people. That's a traumatic, consequential, life-changing event for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, it's 24 deaths right now, and there's so many acres. And look, they're talking about winds ramping back up this week,
Yeah.
so it could continue to get worse. So yeah, it's just the stories are unreal to hear and go through, and our thoughts are with those individuals and all those firefighters working hard to get it done. I think it's what's also encouraging is, we had firefighters from all around the world coming to the United States to
Yeah.
help out
Yeah.
during this time. And I think, we often tout how much we go other places and help others. It's also reassuring when these things happen here, we have other countries coming to help us as well. And it's a lot of great credit to the world when they come together for stuff like this.
They
So,
Mexico and Canada, those vile neighbors we want
oh
to
yeah.
conquer
Yeah.
and hit with huge, massive tariffs. They're sending us, equipment and personnel. And thank you to both of those nations for that. A lot of states are also sending personnel out to help California. Tragedy brings out some of the best and absolute worst in people, and we're definitely seeing, both sides of that right now.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right, Andy, let's wrap up on a Monday. We'll see how things we'll see what the week brings. We'll look forward to getting back together on Wednesday. And so until then, Andy, I'll catch up with you next time.